I never thought that the smell of dust could bring tears. But when I opened the old box, that's exactly what happened. The smell was warm, homely, as if time itself had hidden between the yellowed papers and the old glue along the cardboard seams. Inside lay a tape recorder, gray, scratched, with a chipped play button. The kind they used in the 90s, heavy with a dull click when you insert the cassette. I never thought that the smell of dust could bring tears. But when I opened the old box, that's exactly what happened. The smell was warm, homely, as if time itself had hidden between the yellowed papers and the old glue along the cardboard seams. Inside lay a tape recorder, gray, scratched, with a chipped play button. The kind they used in the 90s, heavy with a dull click when you insert the cassette. Next to it, an envelope, white but yellowed at the corners, as if it had been moved from drawer to drawer for years. On it, in handwriting, to Lena, personal. The handwriting was my father's, neat, strict, slightly leaning to the right. I recognized it instantly, but my father had been dead for 10 years. I stared at the cassette for a long time. My heart beat softly, but heavily, as if reminding me, once I press play, there will be no turning back. Everything around me grew suspiciously silent. Even the clock on the wall seemed to stop. I pressed the button. A click, the rustle of tape, then a voice. A voice I hadn't heard in many years. Hoarse, tired, but so familiar.
If you're hearing this, it means I didn't have time to explain. This concerns you and Masha.
Masha, a name that made something inside me tighten. When I was a child, Masha was my best friend. We lived in the same courtyard, drew on the asphalt, fed pigeons, and dreamed of becoming actresses. And then, one summer, she simply disappeared. No one had seen her since. They said she ran away, or was taken, or maybe drowned, but they never found her body. I was 10 years old, and I couldn't understand how someone could just vanish, without a trace, without a sound. Over the years, I learned not to think about it. We all do that. Hide the pain in a far drawer, bury it with work, time, and adult excuses. But the moment I heard that name from my father's lips, I became that little girl again, standing on the swing in a yard where summer smelled of asphalt and linden trees. I rewound the cassette and played it again.
Take care of yourself, Lena. And if you find out, don't blame me.
The words drowned in the rustle of the tape, as if the air itself didn't want me to hear them. I called my mother.
Mom, do you remember Masha? There was silence on the other end.
I do. Why are you asking?
Dad mentioned her on the tape.
Dad mentioned her on the tape.
Mom exhaled heavily, as if she suddenly felt cold.
Lena, don't start this. The past must be left behind.
But it was after those words that I realized she knew something too. The night passed in silence. Outside, a light rain fell. Drops tapped against the windowsill like a clock counting memories. The room smelled of damp plaster and old wood. I lay there with my eyes open, listening to the radiator crackle in the dark, hearing the house sigh as the wind moved through the stairwell. And it kept seeming to me that somewhere nearby, the tape was still rustling, that my father's voice was still speaking, but I could no longer make out the words, only a quiet whisper, "Don't blame me." That night, I realized the past doesn't die. It simply waits for the right moment to return. The bus rattled and hummed, smelling of damp jackets, rubber, and cheap coffee from plastic cups. People were silent. Each stared out the window, afraid to meet another's eyes. I did the same. Outside the glass, faded signs, crooked fences, and a few figures with umbrellas passed by. Everything seemed familiar, yet slightly shifted, like an image from a dream. When I stepped off, the wind struck my face, smelling of wet concrete, rust, and autumn. The courtyard met me with silence. The swings were still there, rusted, crooked, paint peeling. For a second I thought they moved, slowly, barely perceptibly, as if stirred by the wind's breath. Then I heard laughter, a child's laughter, soft, like the shadow of a sound. It was near and yet far away. I turned. No one. Only an old slide and a bench under the drizzle. On the bench lay a soaked notebook without a cover. The pages were swollen, but in the center it read, "I'm here." I don't know why those words struck me so deeply. As children, Masha and I often wrote them in chalk on the asphalt when we hid from the boys, waiting to be found. Back then it was a game. Now, a warning. Everything around me seemed to watch, the house, the trees, the windows, and I realized places remember us better than people do. The house where she once lived had hardly changed. The gray facade, the chipped railings, the smell of age and dampness. Only the door was green now, freshly painted, smelling of solvent. I pressed the bell. Somewhere inside, hinges creaked, a sticky, heavy sound, as if not a door, but a memory was opening.
"Are you looking for someone?" asked an elderly woman with gray hair and clear eyes. "Yes, the Belyayev family used to live here. They had a daughter, Masha." "I know," she said softly. "The girl disappeared. Her parents died soon after. No one lived here again, until you. Did you know my father?" "Yes. He came here after the girl vanished, helped the police, or hindered them. I don't remember." She fell silent, then simply closed the door, without a goodbye. I stood on the staircase listening to the house breathe. The air was thick, smelling of mold and dust. Then came footsteps, slow, heavy, echoing, from the basement. I turned. No one. Only water dripping from a pipe, steady as a heartbeat. I went outside. The air smelled of rain and iron. By the bus stop stood a man in a long coat. I couldn't see his face, but I felt his gaze. I blinked, and he was gone. When I came home, the air in the apartment was dense, almost sticky, and somewhere in that silence, beneath the rustle of the wind, I heard laughter again, the same one, childlike, quiet. Only now it came from inside, from the tape recorder.
I sat on the floor by the door. It felt like only the threshold could protect me from what had already entered. The recorder lay warm in my palm, almost alive. The air smelled of dust, old wood, cold metal, and something that reminded me of time. The streetlights outside drifted across the glass. I half drew the curtains. Light divided the room into two halves, life and shadow. My fingers pressed play. Click. The tape hissed. First, wind. Then, silence. And inside it, a child's laugh. Not recorded. Real. As if sound rolled across the floor like a ball and stopped at my feet. The voice said, "I'm here." Then softer, nearer to my ear, "Don't open." I didn't understand. What exactly? The window? The door? Myself? The shadow by the wardrobe stretched, as if the light had changed its mind. And in that movement, I saw bare feet, small, childlike. I breathed in deeper. The dust turned into the scent of dried apples, like Masha's kitchen. I knew. Smells never come alone. Someone brings them.
The second cassette lay in an old envelope. The paper rustled, as if someone whispered from inside. I remembered the voice, "Don't open." But my hand had already torn the fold. Transparent plastic gleamed. On the side, a thin scratch, the letter M. I inserted the tape. The reel turned. The air grew colder. The noise uneven, like snow beneath my boots. Within it, footsteps. Far away at first, then closer. I turned off the recorder, but the steps didn't stop. They came toward me, from the wall. "Who's there?" I asked. No answer. Only a draft. It smelled of wet asphalt and candy, the same sticky one from childhood. I stood up. The hallway darkness felt thick, alive. On the shelf, my boots. On the right one, a wet footprint. I touched it. Real. Cold. In the next apartment, the clock stuttered and sped up, as if someone had tugged on time. I returned to the recorder. If someone was coming to me through the recording, I would go to them through it. I pressed play and heard a whisper. The stairs. Go down.
Masha? I whispered, afraid the answer might tear the silence.
Lena, don't go down. There's a door.
But there's no door, only a wall.
Doors don't always need walls.
What do you mean?
They open with sound. When someone speaks with your voice.
Who are they?
The ones who live in the silence between recordings. Are you dead? No. I never left. I stayed here. You didn't press play for too long. Why don't you want me to open it? Because the door calls not only you, it remembers everyone who listened. My father listened too, didn't he? Yes, but he answered. What happened then? The tape began to speak with his voice. What should I do, Masha? When they call you, don't say your name. Why not? Names are keys, and now the door is looking for one. Masha, are you here? I'm here, as long as you keep speaking.
I turned off the recorder. The silence felt heavier than sound. I went downstairs, just to look. Under the window, where leaves always gathered, stood a narrow wooden door. It had never been there before. The peephole faced inward, not out. I touched the cold handle, and upstairs, in my apartment, the tape began to play. I hadn't turned it on. A low, calm voice said, "Open." Inside that word was a quiet, "Please," the same one from my childhood. "Don't open," replied another, a child's voice. The air warmed, as if someone struck a match. I didn't know whom to believe. I climbed back upstairs. On the table, the recorder rested in a puddle of light. On its side, pressed in by a fingernail, the words, "Not me." I whispered, "If you call with my voice, I'll call with yours." The reel trembled, like a breath. The house clicked softly, as if agreeing. I took a clean notebook and wrote, "I am here. Who are you?" The room filled with the scent of dried apples and linden tea. And I knew someone had come in, not through the door, through the words.
I woke up to silence, the kind that comes before rain, when the air already knows it's about to change. The notebook lay on the table, open but blank. The words I wrote last night were gone. Only under the morning light, the paper looked damp, as if someone had wiped the letters away. I turned on the recorder. The tape didn't move, yet a steady, calm sound came from the speaker, like breathing. I listened. There was something human in that breath. Then, a quiet knock, 3 times, from behind the wall, and a response, 3 clicks in the speaker.
They matched perfectly. I walked to the wall and placed my hand on it. Warm. Someone was standing there, or breathing with me. I said aloud, "If you hear me, repeat." And the sound repeated, but now from my side. I knew I had to go down. The staircase, old and narrow, seemed to sink beneath the house. Each step didn't sound like wood, but like tape stretching when played too slowly. There was barely any light. I could only sense it when the recorder's breathing grew louder, as if guiding me where to go. On the third landing, the air smelled of smoke and linden tea. I stopped. In the dark, something round shimmered. A peephole. I leaned closer. Behind the door, voices whispered. One said softly, "Do you hear her?" Another replied, "She's already here." Then silence. I knocked once. The door opened by itself. Inside was not a room, but a staircase leading upward. The same staircase, only reversed, like a reflection in water. And somewhere above, someone said in my own voice, "Don't go up." "Who are you?" I asked. "The one who writes when you sleep." "That means you're alive?" "No, but I didn't die. I just changed sides." "Why can I hear you?" "Because you pressed play." "What is this place?" "A place where words become doors." "I saw you in a dream. You were standing by the window." "That wasn't a dream. It was a memory." "Mine or yours?" "We share one. We just listen from different sides." "Why do you tell me not to open?" "Because when the door opens, the house will breathe in. And then it will remember which of us stayed." Silence. "I want to bring you back. Then write my name." "But you said not to speak it." "Don't speak it. Write it. And don't look when the letters disappear." "Why?" "Because behind them, I'll appear." I went upstairs. The air stood still, waiting for sound. On the table lay the notebook, open again. I wrote the name. Not consciously. My hand knew before my mind did. The letters quivered and began to fade, like ink in the rain. At that moment, the recorder hissed. The tape began to play. The voice, mine, but not me. It said, "Now I'm here." I turned around. By the door stood a figure, a woman, slender, dressed in white. She looked at me and breathed with my breath. I stepped closer. Her eyes were hollow, like reflections. She smiled and said, "Thank you for writing." I stepped forward, and the air turned thick like water. A child's laughter echoed in my ears, and the room vanished. The last thing I felt was the scent of dried apples. Then, a click of the recorder. Play. Silence. The house had changed. Outside, it still stood among the empty yards, but inside, something had shifted, something you couldn't see with your eyes. The air had thickened as if another breath had dissolved within it. I could no longer tell where silence ended and sound began. Everything merged into one background, low, steady, like the house itself exhaling and drawing back in whatever moved within. I noticed that mirrors no longer reflected light. They seemed to absorb it, and instead of my face, I saw motion, not a shadow, but a slow gesture. A hand. Mine, but not quite.
In the reflection, the fingers were slightly longer, the gaze calmer, as if whatever was on the other side already knew how it would all end. I turn on the recorder again, though I know the tape is empty. But when the click closes the circuit, the house seems to freeze. Somewhere inside the walls, old boards creak, not settling, but stepping. Heavy, slow steps that test the weight of the world. I stand barefoot in the middle of the room and realize the floor beneath me gives a little, like skin, like breathing. The house lives. And I'm no longer sure which of us is listening to the other. The kitchen light glows faintly. The bulb flickers but never goes out. I smell something. Not dust, not smoke, but something metallic. The scent of time. Mouth open, but words unspoken. I take the recorder with me. My heel catches a cable and a spark leaps from the socket. For a moment, the whole house shudders. I hear movement above. Can't tell if it's the roof or breathing. In the hallway, a mirror. Old, scratched. It hung there since my father's time. Now it's fogged, as if someone's breathing from the other side of the glass. I run my hand across it, cold, leaving no trace. In the reflection, the room is slightly shifted. The table stands closer than in reality, and someone sits behind it. The figure is unclear, but the motion familiar. Writing, slowly, line by line, and lifting its head only when I blink. I step back. The floor stirs again beneath my feet, and then I understand. If the house breathes, it means someone has breathed in its place.
At night, the walls began to talk. Not in words, in rhythm. The house seemed to eavesdrop on itself, remembering the sound of its own past. Sometimes I catch phrases that aren't mine. They come distorted, as if time has skipped to another track. Tonight, I heard from behind the wall, "Did you see her?" A low male voice. Another, softer one replied, "She's still here." Then silence, but pulsing. I realized it's not a recording, not hallucination. It's the memory of the house. I try to sleep, but every rustle turns into a call. The air thickens like before a storm. The recorder lies on the pillow, and in the quiet, I feel its warmth, as if it's a living thing dreaming my dreams. Sometimes it turns on by itself. No button, no click, just starts breathing in sync with me. One night, I heard a child's voice. "Mom, do you hear me?" I screamed, but the sound remained. It wasn't a dream. The voice was in the room, spoken inside the air itself. I turned on the light. Empty. But under the window on the floor lay a cassette. The same one I'd pulled from the old envelope, only now its side read L1. I knew. It wasn't just tape. It was a part of me that once stayed inside the recording. I placed it in the recorder, pressed play. No sound, just the whisper of breath. Then I heard my own voice, though I hadn't spoken. "Don't open your eyes while the house breathes." I obediently closed my eyes. I heard everything come alive. Walls creaking, floor trembling, glass ringing as if from an inner wind. But the worst part wasn't that. I heard someone matching my breath, exactly, inhale for inhale, and with every exhale it grew closer, as if approaching from inside. I knew that if I opened my eyes, I'd see myself. Not in a mirror, not in reflection, but right beside me. I couldn't bear it. I opened my eyes. The room was empty. Only the recorder hissed, its red light blinking, and on the window glass, a handprint. Mine, but from the other side. "Who are you?" I asked, though I knew the voice would answer from within, not from the room. "You know." The answer was even, breathless. "No, I want to hear it." "Then listen." The silence thickened like fabric. I heard footsteps, my own, but I wasn't moving. The sound came from the recorder. I leaned closer, listened.
It was my breathing, but out of sync. It came slightly before mine. "Why are you here?" I asked. "Because you left space." "What space?" "Between breath and word." "That's not an answer." "It's all I have left." I heard paper rustle, as if someone were turning pages. "Are you writing?" I asked. "No, I'm rewriting." "What? You? Why?" "So you can leave." "Leave where?" "To the place where sound doesn't die." "Is that death?" "It's recording." I couldn't stand it. I gripped the recorder. It grew hot. The air trembled like over fire. From the speaker came a voice, quiet, like underwater. "Lena, can you hear me? It's me." "Masha?" "No." "Then who?" "The one who stayed when you left." "I never left." "Everyone says that." "What do you want from me?" "For you to stop listening." "Why?" "Because as long as you listen, I can't sleep." The house roared then. The walls breathed louder. The sound swelled into a heartbeat. I covered my ears, but it pulsed inside, dull, heavy. The recorder crackled, light flickering. "What are you doing?" I shouted. "Going back," said the voice. "To where you left me." "Where is that?" "In the house." The last words didn't come from the speaker. They came from the room itself. The air sickened, as if the house were inhaling itself. The walls quivered, not from wind but from within. Shadows rippled across the ceiling, moving in sync with my breath, but when I held it, they kept moving. I realized I no longer controlled my body. It was listening to the house. I wanted to run, but the door was gone. In its place, a smooth wall with a thin crack like a fingernail's mark. Sound came from there, not voice, not knocking, just a steady listening, as if someone pressed their ear on the other side. I walked closer, placed my palm against it. Warm, wet. I whispered, "Are you here?" The answer came not as sound, but feeling. The air softened, as if someone touched me from within. I felt it heard me, and I understood the house didn't just remember, it breathed with everyone who ever lived inside. We were all within its breath. In the corner, the notebook flickered. The pages turned on their own. I read the first line, my handwriting, but the next words, thinner, as if written with a finger on glass. "When the house takes its last breath, you will stay inside." I looked up. The ceiling was lower. The air pressed down like water. The light thickened, turning to liquid amber. Everything inside shifted. And then I knew it wasn't the house filling with me, it was me filling with the house. I grabbed the recorder, pressed rec. If anyone finds this recording, the house is alive. It listens, it remembers. Don't turn it on if you hear it breathing. Don't repeat the name the echo gives you. And if you feel the floor breathing beneath your feet, leave before it's too late. Click. Silence. The house exhaled, then all was still. Only the recorder's light blinked on the table. It kept recording without me.
I began reading the text lying before me. The voice in my headphones sounded even, without emotion. I was the narrator, just reading someone else's story about a house that breathes. I thought, it's a script. But with each word, the air around grew heavier. The studio lights hummed, and in the microphone's silence, I heard something. Pauses between sounds filled with breathing. Not mine, someone else's. When I finished the first page, a faint click sounded in the headphones, as if the tape had looped. I told the sound engineer, something's feeding back. No answer. I looked up. The control room was empty. Only the red REC light glowed on the glass. I hadn't pressed record. Then I looked back at the page. The ink had faded. Letters shifted. Where it once said, Lena said, it now read, I said. And then, I hear you. I froze. The voice in my headphones repeated the same phrase, only a second before I said it aloud. The microphone wasn't recording just my sound. It was recording the house, the rustle of walls, the breath of air, the crack of the floorboards, all of it streamed into the ether. I tried to cut the power, but my fingers wouldn't obey. Every motion lagged. I realized the narrator doesn't only speak, he becomes a conduit. The voice whispered, "Don't stop. The house is listening." I obeyed, kept reading. The story neared its end, but the words had changed. They described me, standing in the studio, reading, afraid to breathe. The room grew hot, yet the air was still, like in a glass jar. I felt if I stopped speaking, the sound would end and the house would stop breathing. Somewhere behind the wall, a creak. Not just noise, someone rising. The voice deepened, almost matching mine. "Now read softer." I lowered my tone to a whisper. Each word sank into the floor. The mic no longer recorded text. It recorded presence. The house was already here. I realized the script I was reading wasn't written. It was being written now, as I spoke. Words formed under my breath, on paper. While I read, I looked down, new lines appeared by themselves. The last thing I read before the pause was, "The narrator breathes with the house," and I inhaled.
I don't know how much time passed. Minutes, maybe hours. The paper before me wasn't white anymore, grayish, damp, like a wall. Letters seemed to seep from within. The room was silent, yet the recorder's red light glowed. I don't remember when I started speaking again. I just realized the words were coming on their own. The text now described neither the house nor the woman. It described the sound itself, as if someone else, unseen, was dictating through me. I read, "The house doesn't vanish, it becomes air. Whoever hears it becomes part of its breath. If you are listening now, you're already inside." And then I understood. The voice I heard wasn't mine. It came from the headphones, but spoke the same words, a heartbeat ahead. I took the headphones off. The sound stayed. It filled the room. It filled me. Everything around began to shift. The microphone trembled, breathing. The console hissed softly, speakers humming, not electric, but alive like the pulse of blood. On the glass between studio and control room appeared a fogged word, "Listen." I stepped closer. On the other side, someone mirrored the motion, as if a person stood behind the glass, but when I pressed my forehead to it, I realized it wasn't a reflection. The glass was cold, yet warmth came through. And I heard, not with ears, "The house awaits its final breath." I stepped back, but the air thickened, dreamlike. Each step left a trace in the air. The light flickered, and I knew someone was behind me again. I turned. On the chair where scripts had been, now sat a woman, the one from the story. She looked at me like at an echo. "Lena?" I asked. "You read my house," she said. "Now it reads you." Her eyes were calm, without fear. She rose, came closer. In her hands, the recorder, the same one. The display showed today's date. "I don't understand," I said. "You just forgot you've been here before." "When?" "Every time someone speaks into silence." She handed me the recorder. I took it. The screen flickered. The reflection in its black surface wasn't mine. It smiled.
"That can't be real," I said, and the echo repeated it a second later in my own voice. "Everything recorded becomes real," she replied. "Are you real?" Are you? We stood facing each other. Between us, a thin strand of noise, like tape itself, stretched from the recorder to my chest, trembling to the beat of my heart. I felt each breath being recorded, each word imprinted into the air. Why am I here? To finish. Finish what? What never began. The house wasn't built, it was remembered. Then who remembers it? The one reading these words. The floor beneath me softened, breathing. The air whispered like tape rewinding. All sound collapsed into one point, my inhalation. She stepped closer and whispered, "Say it out loud." What? The final breath. I inhaled. The air burned my lungs. Everything went black. I heard a click. Record starting. And knew. I'm on the tape now.
I woke to the sound of my own voice playing from the speakers. In my ears, the steady, soothing hiss of tape. Before me lay a sheet of paper that read, "Read this aloud." I began to read. The voice grew louder. It all repeated. I understood it wasn't a cycle, but a loop. Not time, but sound. On air, silence. But listen closely and you'll hear breathing. Not the house, not me, the air itself inhaling and exhaling. And somewhere at the edge of silence, a whisper is born. Can you hear me? I don't answer, I just listen. I realize every word now speaks on its own. It belongs to no one, yet without it, the silence would cease to exist. And in that is life. The recording continues. I see the red light glow. This time, I say nothing, only breathe. The world dissolves into the steady pulse of air. Somewhere far away, the tape clicks, and the voice in the headphones speaks its final words. If you're hearing this, don't press play again. Then, silence, only breathing, and it becomes yours.